how are you doing? I hope you're having a great day. So I'm going to mix things up and have a conversation with one of my dearest friends, Tom Phillips, who is a mystery author, because I want to learn a little bit more about mysteries in the mystery genre to be better at it for Dungeons and Dragons. So, hey, Tom.
Hi.
We're going to talk what mysteries you've written. Mm-hmm. What mysteries inspire you?
Sure.
What makes a good mystery?
Sure. Yeah.
Tom.
That was like music playing. It was like a with Carmichael.
So, Tom, what mysteries have you written?
I wrote The Curious League of Detectives and Thieves. It's a mid-grade mystery series. It's a mid-grade series about a kid who lived in the Museum of Natural History in New York, and he gets framed for stealing a ruby, and then he has to team up with the world's greatest detective to catch the real thief, a criminal mastermind known as the Mauve Moth. Ooh. So it's a kid's mystery. There are 3 books in the series. Actually, the 3rd book comes out next August, so there's 2 books out right now.
Great.
Yeah.
2024 August?
2024 August, yeah.
Great.
I forgot what year it was.
What are some of the mystery novels and archetypes that inspired you the most?
Okay, so I'm like a crime noir guy, right?
Yeah.
Like, I read every Agatha Christie book there is, all 1 million of them. You know, I grew up on the Hardy Boys, the 3 Investigators. As I got older with Sherlock Holmes, pretty standard mystery, classic mystery. So really with my books, each one of my book, I've kind of pulled a theme that Agatha Christie had developed because she's sort of the queen of mystery. Every mystery idea that we came from, you know, she's the Shakespeare of mystery.
What's a couple of the books that she's written?
Orient Express, the Death on the Nile, and Haunting in Venice, which is actually the Halloween Party, short story Halloween Party. Okay. Are all Agatha Christie, and those movies just came out. They did a really great. They've done many versions of each one of them, but the ones with Kenneth Branagh just came out, and they're all fabulous.
So you're well read.
I'm semi-read.
Well done.
I'm well done. I'm medium rare. I'm medium rare. I'm medium red. I don't know. Right in the middle, a little pink in the middle there. But I like mysteries. So I you know, television and film and stuff, you know, that's where I go for, you know, from Dateline to The After Party, which just came out, which is a really great modern noir sort of thing. I love mysteries. I devour them. Yeah.
So I should make sure I have this book because this will guide this thought.
I'll do like a little elevator music. He went to go get a book, but he doesn't know where it's at. So we're filling with music. It's a mystery. Where did I leave the book? What's the book called? So You Want to Be a Game Master by Justin Alexander. There's a stack of books over there.
Yeah.
Thank you for bookmarking and not dog-earing the pages.
Oh, yeah. I did write a lot, though, in highlight.
And never trust a person who dog-ears their pages. That's my first rule in mysteries.
I have a lot of things outlined in here that we can cover a lot of things, but I want to get to very important stuff.
That's fine.
What are some of the most important aspects of the mystery genre is needed to define it as a mystery?
Okay, so mysteries break down. Glad you asked that question. Mysteries break down to really 3 things, right? 3 simple thoughts. Someone is killed, something is stolen, or something is missing. And then you have investigators, obviously. You have suspects, right? You have clues. So there's three things. You can't have a mystery without somebody to solve it. You can't have a mystery unless somebody committed it. And it's really just answering a question, right? The mystery is answering the question. Mm-hmm. Now, how we lead the people through that question is the adventure of our story. That's where the clues come in, and suspects, and the locations, and all these things. But it really boils down to somebody did something. We want to know who it is. How do we figure out who it is? Because the person who did it is not going to tell us. Mm-hmm. Every mystery can be boiled down to somebody's killed, something is stolen, or something is missing. Now, something is missing is, like theft is something stolen for value.
Okay.
Where missing is something is missing, someone is missing. Like a kid is lost in the woods.
Okay.
Is a mystery,
so it's
right?
So kidnapping is theft. So missing is something is no longer where
there.
It's supposed to be.
And a lot of times there's a lot of crossover of those 3 themes, right? Like You'll have a kid is missing in the woods. We go find out that this person has stolen them. Or like in Lovely Bones, this man kills her, and she's trying to figure out she's went missing. The man has killed her, and then the whole book and the whole movie is that the character who's been killed trying to get her family to help find her.
Yeah.
Right? So it's like, You can mix those up, but those themes are pretty much where it's at. And I would say the difference between theft and missing is that sometimes the theft is it's intentional, where the missing doesn't have to be. Like a kid lost in the wood doesn't have to be. He could just be a kid lost in the woods. You know, it's that mysterious cave appears, right? And you explore it. It's a question that needs to be answered, and then somebody decides that they are going to answer that question, and then we follow them through the adventure. And if there were no clues, there would be no adventure. So
I often, as a dungeon master, I feel that when we go dungeon crawling versus just a heroic adventure, right?
Yeah.
A dungeon crawl, in my mind, and the difference between a dungeon crawl and a heist, the mystery is happening while you're in the dungeon. You're trying to figure out where is this place from, what's around the next corner, where is the goal, what is this?
Yeah.
While a heist, the mystery is before.
How do we get it out?
It's
sort of
it's all
like
the prep building up to the dungeon diving.
I would say that's the difference between a heist and an exploration. So exploration is, we're going to go into this deep, darkened cave and hope to find something of value, right? Where a heist is, there's something of value, so now we're going to go into this deep, dark cave and take it, and we know it's there. So how do we do that? How do we plan before? So yeah, it's about planning. But also with like dungeon crawls, you know, some of the boringness, I think, of dungeon crawls and Dungeons & Dragons is that it is that, right? You're just like, I'm going to throw them in a cave and they're going to wander around and maybe they'll find something, maybe they won't, right? But if you give them reason, if the mayor's daughter was kidnapped and she's in the back of the cave, now it's a rescue mission. Now there's purpose to be in the cave.
Exactly.
And the difference between boring and exciting is purpose. And that's in any game, right? Like
and
any
almost
adventure.
every motivation for a story.
Yeah, it's all about purpose. It's like random encounters, right? This is really about mystery. The random encounters. You roll a die, you get a random encounter. The random encounter isn't as exciting
as a ticking
player,
clock
to
to something that is most likely going to happen.
But when a dungeon master makes a list of random encounters that could further the plot, but they happen to pop in at that moment or lead a string to the next thing, then it makes it have purpose. So anytime your game feels boring, it's just like in a mystery or book. Anytime a chapter feels boring, you always go back and go, what's the purpose of this chapter? Why are the characters doing these things? Is it filler to get from point A to point B? Because if it is, we need to cut that and figure out what goes in there. Because just traveling all day long.
Yeah, you know, random tables are extremely helpful because it's like, rather than it helps prevent railroading, but also if you prepare your tables, it's all purposeful.
Yeah. So you can have both. So you're not, I mean, random tables are made so the DM doesn't have to like plan, like have their head explode, right?
Exactly.
But
there's something, the other day I was writing a script on like how to start DMing an adventure right now. I broke down conflict into two things or two steps. And I'm curious on your thought on this in the form of a mystery. There's the first conflict of a dungeon and a second conflict of a dungeon. The first conflict is from the perspective of the outsiders. It's like, there's a spooky dungeon up on the mountain and occasionally there's songs and it pulls people away and we don't know what's going on. Can you help us?
Yeah.
The second conflict is the reason why that's happening from the perspective of inside the dungeon, and you can only discover that by going into the dungeon.
Well, I think it's sort of like when you make your mystery, you have your criminal's point of view and your investigator's point of view, right? So a lot of times people say you write a mystery backwards. So you write it backwards because you want to plan how to get the clues to match each other and make it up. You start at the end and go, okay, this is where I'm at. What could he leave to do this? Then what does this and this and this, and it goes back. And then the investigator, when you write it, you go forward, and now the investigator's following these clues and they lead to your ending. So you don't end up in this like weird spot that you're like, what happened? What were those clues? And there's this two perspective. But I've always said too, is like your criminal has purpose. It has meaning why they're doing the thing. So it's sort of that way. Like the second side of it is why did the criminal steal the ruby in the first place?
Right.
Is it for value? Is it for, they need it to
pay off a debt,
or is it a magical item or a weapon, or is it going to be the thing that opens the tomb, that opens up the treasure they're actually looking for? Is it a key and not a ruby? Like what is the thing, right? And they have to give them purpose. Now, some people think that they have to overdo it, but there's just something about value, Sometimes it's a dude that stole a ruby because it's expensive, and they're going to sell it for $1 million, and they're going to go live on their pirate island and live happily ever after, right?
That may or may not be the plot of Tom's book. No spoilers. To figure that out, you have to get the book. Link down below.
I'm not going to say whether it is or not. No, I'm just saying, like, so it doesn't have to be in a book. It can be very simple.
I think it should be simple in a D&D game because it's so easy for us as players to overthink it.
Yeah.
And while we overthink it, we're adding to the idea anyway. If it's a smart dungeon master, it's like, yes.
Yeah, and I mean, like, and if you want to extend, right, one of the easiest things to do is the item leads to a bigger item, right?
Another item, yeah.
It's just like Buffy the Vampire Slayer was that every season is a bigger bad. But all the big bads lead to the next big bad. Like, they're all connected until we're at the Hellmouth and the whole world's going to be destroyed. But in D&D is sort of like that. Everything's sort of a step.
My thinking on villains, when you make a villain for Dungeons and Dragons, we often, as DMs, want to have that reoccurring villains like, oh, this is going to be the big bad and he shows up again.
Yeah.
But that takes away a lot from us players and our agency. So if you go like, all right, this is going to be the villain of the campaign, wiped out in one battle.
Yeah.
It's like, well, he was only the henchman. Good job, everybody.
Well, there's a thing with that too, though, like, because we level up, so the bad guys level up, right?
Yeah.
So you're not going to meet
the baddie,
the 20th level bad guy in the first scene of your level 1 thing, because there's no way you can take him. You will be able to kill that guy in one shot, right? But let's say there's this evil Baron and he's the bad guy, and you've set this up as a DM, and you're like, this is gonna be my Darth Vader, and it's gonna be so awesome, and then the players outthink you and they turn him into
4 brains versus 1.
Yeah, they polymorph him into a worm and then put him in a jar and then toss him in a volcano, and you're like, well, that guy's dead. That it's a very simple thing to be like, okay, because you did that, now you've opened up even a bigger door, because that mayor might have been this horrible Genghis Khan of a character, but he was keeping out the bigger bad. So now you have to deal with that consequence, because actions have consequences.
And I feel like that falls into clues for a mystery.
Yeah.
Like, you didn't intend that to just be a clue. You intended that to be the answer to the mystery.
Yeah.
But in the process of doing it, it opened the door to being like, you know what? No, that's the clue.
Well,
which makes it more satisfying.
Well, and it's easier for me as a writer too, because I'm the only player. I'm the DM and the player, so I get to decide what the players make the decision, and I get to be really clever. But in D&D, like, the whole point of D&D is that we're telling the story together. Right. So you have to be able, as a DM, to change. Yeah,
I often say a dungeon master is not a storyteller, because they're only the setting and the antagonist. A story requires protagonists, and that's the players.
Yeah. So you're basically the thief in the mystery. You've set up why the crime has happened, and you've led all the clues, but then it's the player's job to be the detective and go on the story. Right. So you're almost working backwards again that way, but you're the thief, you're the villain. But
also knowing, to add on to what you were saying before, working backwards is knowing the reason, the motivation, the goal of whether it's kill, theft, or missing, right?
Yeah.
Whether you're writing the novel because of writer's block, or you got yourself into a corner, or you're the DM and you're in a literal corner because of players' agency, it's easier to make up a new clue that leads in the right direction.
Yes, you can throw in new things.
Which is not ideal, but it's
but you're working live, so you got to pivot, you got to move the thing. Yeah, I totally agree. I think that my biggest thing is purpose. Right?
Purpose.
You have to remember that your players are going to, or your readers, they are going to come up with solutions to problems that don't exist.
Yep.
They're going to come up with problems to, like, the most complex solution to the most easy basic thing. Everybody overdoes it. And they also are going to decide that they're right in their head. And then when you give them an ending that doesn't follow what they think is right, that's when they're like, this is a bad book. This is a bad story. That doesn't make sense. These things didn't work, and whatever, right?
Because they believed in their idea.
So I always say, like, with my books, every line, every word, every way to describe something has purpose. There's a meaning, all the way down to the murder weapon, right? Like you have to think of murder weapons as emotional tools. If somebody is poisoned, most of the time the killer is someone who has been betrayed by that person. They have to be like, I'm going to poison you, right? But the idea of poison is that it eats you out from the inside. So if you ever feel lost or betrayal, it feels like your heart is being eaten out by the inside. So the weapon becomes the motivation of becomes the emotion of your character. If you have a cold-blooded killer that's paid to do it, he's going to shoot somebody with a gun. They're far away. He doesn't have to look at anybody. If it's somebody who is like a sexual predator, they're going to use a knife because they're literally penetrating. Like all of these thoughts of like how you develop that. And when you do that in your D&D game, right? Like when you leave a clue, why did the Genghis Khan character, why is he shut everybody out? Why is he being this way? Well, how did he become this like crazy demagoguan character? That's not the right word, but you guys know what I mean. Maybe it's because he watched his family get murdered by this outside group of people, and he has now like put everybody in there, and he's kept them safe, and he got power, and he got money, and he got greedy. But originally, his thing was he didn't want somebody to get hurt. This
reminds me of it's also good, not just mystery design, but monster design, like the alien, the xenomorph alien. It's meant to, like you were saying, penetrate the victim, and it's meant to give birth to another creature.
Yeah.
So it's like how it did its original attack influences the next stage of the plot.
Yeah.
Or the thing that popped when you said murder weapon was Matt Reeves' The Batman, where because Batman is born of privilege, he doesn't necessarily know what a carpet cutter looks like. He just thinks it's a blunt or sharp weapon.
Yeah.
But it's the clue to get to point out that, hey, the villain is of poverty, so he's in the poor district.
Yeah.
It's also a clue to the next big clue that if you knew it ahead of time, you could pick up the carpet in his lair and see the whole plan come together.
Yeah.
And it's tied in.
It's not only a murder weapon, but it's also the clue to the next thing. And like, so clues.
I think that's really cool and really smart as a dungeon master, a writer to remember.
That was such a greatly made movie. It was flawless.
It's so good.
Especially because, and like Batman is crime noir, right? Like it's a detective 100%. Who's gritty and dark and this whole thing. I love Batman for that. And I feel like a lot of the Batman movies he's a superhero, and I'm like, he's not. He's a detective. So like,
and Matt Reeves nailed it.
Yeah. And you know, like, so Batman really came around that time with like The Shadow. All the radio plays. So like, I love The Shadow. What darkness lies in the heart of men, the shadow knows, you know, like that thing. And that's where a lot of crime noir came from, was this like radio show, verbal storytelling, which is so funny that podcasts are so big right now because we started with radio and now we're kind of come back.
That's great.
It makes sense. But it's the same thing with Dungeons and Dragons, right? A lot of it's imagination of the mind. Like we are explaining things where it's a very verbal storytelling. So that's why things matter when you the way you say them. Because if you say, you pick up a carpet knife, somebody's like, oh, it's a knife. But if you're like, you find an instrument used to install carpet, it has a bladed end and a large like hammer at the end to beat the carpet down. Yeah. Now I'm not telling you it's a knife, but if I say knife, you're like, oh, it's a weapon. Right.
It's kind of like describing a dragon, not saying the word dragon.
Yeah. Yeah. And you have to be careful about that. Like, and that's the other thing. If you're like, it's a scaly worm, you know, that lives in the deep, dark dungeon of the ground, people are like, oh, these players are smart. They're gonna be like, oh, that's a dragon. Right. But then when you show up and it's just a giant worm with armor, they're gonna throw them off. They're gonna be like, wait, what? No, it's supposed to be a dragon. I thought it was supposed to be a dragon.
You said dragon. Also I never said dragon.
Have to remember that players, even though they will say this, will always use player knowledge.
Oh, of course.
It's just the way, I mean, what you know before until you experience it the first time.
100%. You know?
So you have to think about that too and lead them the way you want to. But it's also a really great way of taking players and twisting what they know and what they think they know. I think the movie Willow had the best line in their trailer, was like, forget what you know or think you know. And there was like Willow, because it was a twist on magic, right? Right. And that's sort of how I feel like when I tell stories and stuff. Like, I will lead you down, knowing that you've read Death of the Nile. You know who the killer is, and you know why, and all these things, and I will lead you down that path. And you're like, it's this person, and it's not. And you're like, wait, what? And I'm like, yeah, I made you follow these clues, which is what we call the red herring, right?
Right.
And just for people who don't know, the red herring is nobody knows where the red herring.
Rabbit. No,
it's a fish. No, the red herring actually a lot of people attribute it to Agatha Christie, a clue that is made to mislead on purpose. So, if
the first time I learned about red herring was the Roger Rabbit movie.
Oh yeah, Who Framed Roger Rabbit?
And I always thought red herring meant a red-headed woman.
Oh, that's funny. No.
It was like every time I watched a movie after, I was like, oh.
Yeah, that's funny. That's a good crime noir, though.
It is. It's great.
It's a good mystery.
So describing things. And how you describe things. So in the book, so you want to be a game master.
Yeah, brilliant.
In the chapter Mysteries.
Mysteries, part 2.
In this book, it describes that for D&D, red or tabletop games, red herrings are overrated because the players will red herring themselves.
I was about to say that. Yeah, you don't need a red herring in D&D because the player will come up with the red herring. It's almost the opposite of red herring, where they're going to come up with a clue that has absolutely nothing to do with anything, and then you have to bring it back, and suddenly it has to be a clue that matters. Yeah. So I would say in D&D, do not use red herrings. Just give them exactly what they're supposed to do.
Because red herring is not necessarily for the investigator. It is for the reader / listener / viewer.
Yes.
To still be in the mystery with the detective.
Yeah, because if you can guess the end of the book before the book happens,
right,
it's no fun. In D&D, they'll never guess the ending, because if they do, if they're like, it was him the whole time, and it was like, you're in this thing, and you're like, who's the mysterious overlord? And they're like, it's the beggar on the street because of this and this and this and this, and you figure it out. You're like, great, now you figured it out, but guess what? I'm changing things, and you move on, right? Like, right. Or you give it to them, and you're like, they know who it is, and then they get there
and they're satisfied by that because they think smart.
Yeah. Or they decide they're going to try to trap the beggar, and then you double trick them, like this.
Yeah.
There's always a way with Dungeons and Dragons to, once again, pivot. You have to be water. It has to have a solution. In books, it's not. It's a brick. Like, it has to be this brick. And in D&D, you have to be fluid. You have to let things happen. You have to not take things personal. You have to, as a DM, you're not the author of a story.
You're not the storyteller.
You're just the editor that got the story together, and now you're just like throwing it out there, and all the other writers are the players, and you get to write too. It's a room of writers. It's not one.
But you don't get to write the protagonist stuff as a dungeon master. No. You write the antagonist.
Yeah, well, and I like to think that the dungeon master is sort of like a showrunner of a television show, where they're like, yes, we're going to take that. Yes, we're going to do that. Let's put this together. That's a great idea. This is what I have. I'm going to throw this stuff out and control the flow of the river.
Sure, yeah.
But they're not. The other writers' ideas are what's making.
It's fueling the whole thing, yeah.
Yeah.
So in this book, when it comes to clues, mentions there are 2 types of clues.
Okay.
And I can't find any more. So apparently there are only 2 types of clues.
2 types of clues. Yeah.
There are leads that point in the next direction to go, the next scene, the next location.
Yeah.
And they're the most common clue for a mystery to have.
This clue leads me to the next clue, leads me to the next clue, leads me to the next clue, and then we get till we get to the end.
Right. And then there is evidence, which helps you understand what is happening, aka who the murderer is.
Oh, that's interesting. That's an interesting thought.
So the evidence as a clue doesn't point you to the next direction. It gives you a hint of what the ending could be. Who did it?
Yeah. Oh, that's interesting.
If your criminal has a themed color, you find that color. That's an evidence clue.
Calling card, yeah. Oh yeah, my first book, the Mauve Moth leaves a calling card every time they steal something, because part of them stealing thing is the game.
Right, so that's not a lead, but it is evidence.
Evidence of who could have been the person, yeah.
Yeah.
That's interesting, because I feel like you have clues. You have the 2 types of clues I would say is that you have opens and closed clues. Okay. So the open clue is what he's saying, the lead. I found a feather. It's a red feather, and I know that the museum curator has a parrot, And I'm like, it's got to go to the parrot then, right? I found the parrot's feather, so the museum curator had to be there because he's the guy who did it. Or we're like, obviously somebody's using a bird we've already found the feather. We don't know what type of feather it was. We know this guy's using birds, and we know the museum curator loves birds. So then I will leave let's say I don't want him to go to the museum curator, so I'm going to close that thought off.
Okay.
So if they get too far off, I can close that off. So they're like, they find a day planner and realize the museum curator was in Paris that weekend. That's a clue, but it's closing off that suspect so we can move away from him. And I'll do that. I think it's helpful with D&D because you might get, when your characters are getting too far off and they're like, hey, let's follow this the slime trail. It must be a giant snail. And you're like, there are no giant snails. That's something that happened to us. And we're still waiting for the giant snail.
We hunted down that snail across the universe.
Yeah, and the DM still to this day, he was just like, why a snail? And somebody said it, I think, as a joke, and we all ran with it. But he could have very easily been like, you realize these are salt mines.
Right.
So obviously a snail or a slug would never survive here, so it couldn't have been a giant snail. And we moved on.
But knowing us at that table, we'd be like, so you're saying this snail is immune to salt?
Yes, the snail is immune. So it's a magical snail. I get you, right? And which is what players do, right?
So now we've created a red herring for ourselves.
We've created a red herring, and then but with the evidence thing too, it's really important that some clues. I think what he's trying to say is some clues lead to the next location, and some clues give you information about that, so you can put together who done it.
Yeah.
Right?
So with your red feather example, the red feather can be a lead or an evidence.
Yeah.
It can be, hey, we need to go to a place where there are birds.
Yes.
Or it could be somebody who has a bird or a feathered hat.
Yeah.
Was here.
Yeah, and then I would say the best thing to do is then you have the museum curator who has a parrot with red feathers. You have met I'm gonna make up characters. You met the actor from the Broadway show, and he is dressed as a has a long red feather boa or whatever. And then you have the person at the speakeasy that has a red feather in their hat. And now we've got all these suspects. You're like, okay, well, it's got to be one of these three people.
Right. And that can feel like a red herring.
Yeah.
But if you lay out from my understanding, if you lay out not a buffet, a menu of red feather options, now you're making meaningful choices for the characters in the story to actually be investigators.
Yeah.
And they have to figure it out before the correct one with the red feather commits another murder.
Yeah, well, I did this thing in my first book. The mauve moth always wears purple, right? So they're always looking for somebody who's purple. So they finally make their trap. They're figuring it out. They're like, we're going to catch the mauve moth. This is going to be really great. And they go into speakeasy, and then the Monday that they don't know about the speakeasy is that each day has a different color theme. So they're at Mauve Mondays. So everybody in the entire speakeasy is dressed in purple.
That's amazing.
Which is a really great way of being like, oh, come on, with your players.
Yeah.
To get that next thing. You can also put clues in in dialogue. People don't think of it in combat. People don't think about mysteries with combat. You fight a guy and he is a swashbuckler, and if somebody rolled a perception or you have the DM roll perception, they notice that he's fighting with his left hand.
Right.
You're like, okay, the guy's left-handed, and we move on. And then you find out that the character, the bad guy you've been looking for, lost his right hand to a dragon, so he's left-handed. And you're like, wait, what's this? I heard this left-handed thing. And then when you see the guy the next time, you see he has a glove on his hand, right? And then later you can, go into a magic shop to buy stuff, and they're like, oh, well, do you have any, what do you need? We've got this, we've got that, we've got stuff. He's like, you need an eyeball? I got all types of magical body parts.
Right.
And that magical body part is the DM being like, the dude you fought is missing his right hand, but you didn't notice because he was wearing gloves. But I just threw that out there in the middle of a shopping day to give another clue for somebody to think of that a player might pick up, right? So a throwaway clue is a really fun way in mysteries to keep people going, because then afterwards when they get to the part where that guy's missing the hand, he's like, oh my gosh, that guy told us at level 3. We're now level 15, told us at level 3 that he has all types of body parts he sells to replace when things go missing.
Yep.
He told us flat out, right?
In that magical shop, you could describe, oh yeah, I got blue eye, green eye, red eye. And then you make sure that you listed those 3 specific colors in that order.
Yeah.
And then every time something happens, a suspect has an eye color of that blue, green, and red.
Red, yeah.
And it's meant to be in that order to try to remind you.
Yeah.
But also as a DM,
It's hard.
Reminding them on above the table of like, this is something familiar about this, and then go back in.
It's hard with the DM to have a specific order of clues. I find a lot of DMs are like, in their mystery, if I have this feather, but it's supposed to lead, the feather's supposed to lead to the library is supposed to lead to the weapon shop, the
Very
weapon shop's supposed to
linear.
lead to things, right?
Yeah.
It's very linear. And in books, it's great.
Easy.
And things, they'll be like, I need to go to the library. Well, what if they find that clue that you have set? The only thing you can do is take that clue out, but then that cheapens the people, because then when they go back in your linear and they're like, wait a second, was that the library? Why did we find that when I rolled the natural 20 in investigation the first time, right? So you have to kind of, all the clues in a like it's a whole bunch of clues that lead to one person, so you might need more than one to get there to eliminate people out. It's sort of like Guess Who in that sense.
I would like your opinion on a few things.
Sure.
Ways to be a good mystery dungeon master. Tools. Okay? So we have ways to describe things. We're going to start with the 3 of 5 rule from Justin Alexander's book.
Okay.
Pick 3 senses to describe a place, thing, or person.
Yeah.
Like, what do you see? A thing that you see or hear or smell,
Yeah.
right? Or a balancing or a thing like that.
Yeah.
Then there is the 2 cool details.
Okay.
They're insignificant.
They're just cool. It's just
put 1 or 2 cool things in there just to be like, that's pretty cool.
It's pretty cool. There's an old subway station. It's there's a chandelier made of blue crystals that, sparkle like a 1970s disco, things like that.
Oh, that's neat.
Yeah, that's cool. It has nothing to do with anything, but it's
No,
fun.
Yeah. And then my favorite, the 3x3.
Okay.
So rather than making a list of invisible information, which can get overwhelming as a reader or as a player, is you walk into a room, break the room up into 3 things. 3 most important things that the characters would notice. So we walk into a bedroom. There is a bed, a open window, and a lit fireplace. Those are the 3 things that the players can choose from. Those are the 3 things that the reader gets to know that's in the room. The rest is built in the imagination.
Yeah.
But then the 3x3 is each element of the 3 need 3 details to describe it.
Yeah.
So it's not just a bed, it's a old, dusty, decayed bed.
Yeah.
The open window, well, it's open. It's not just a window. So we have an open...
It only has 1/2 of a wooden shutter left, and it looks like it's rusted open.
Great.
Right?
And then we have a fireplace, a lit fireplace made of cobblestone and skulls, and something's missing from the top. You notice something's missing.
There's a sunspot where a painting once was.
Perfect.
Yeah.
So those 3 details of 3 elements.
Yes.
I feel like that would make it easier. But then
there's actually a psychological thing with 3s.
All right, we'll get into that.
Yeah.
100% is once a player chooses one of those elements to investigate, 3x3. You give them another 3 elements with 3 details in there. And rather than giving you all this high resolution 4K, you just give them standard
Piece
def,
by piece. Yeah.
standard def, and then when they
Focus on
step
everything.
away, they earned 4K.
Yeah, it's microscoping. It's called microscoping, where you start out and you get a bit closer and closer and closer to detail. So you start out with it's a fireplace, and then when they investigate the fireplace, it's a cobblestone. And then when you go in, one of they roll perception, and like one of the cobblestones looks loose, and they pull it out like it's this thing. If you go, this giant cobblestone fireplace that has different things, and there's some of them are sticking out and misplaced and all this stuff, like you're missing, not only are you giving so much detail they can't remember it, but then you're also just not giving them the chance to
to
hear
choose
and feel and be part of it. You're just telling them instantly. You're not, we talk about show and not tell. It's sort of a show and not tell in a way of
In
there
words.
there's no visual.
Yeah.
So you have to learn how to.
And I feel like in a book, it would be very much the main character of your book is John.
Mm-hmm.
John walks into a room and sees this thing. John walks closer and then spots these extra things.
Yeah.
So it's the same concept.
Yeah. Well, and the truth behind it is that in books, it's pacing. I'm going to come back to the rule of 3, but in books, it's about pacing. So if John is being chased by a bear through a forest, he doesn't have time to tell you what the trees look like.
Right.
But once he gets into the cabin, shuts the door, locks the door, and he's safe, suddenly now we can describe because he has a breath, and you want to, because you want your reader to go, I'm running. I need a breath.
Yeah.
So you write more detail, and the more you describe, the slower it gets.
Right.
And you use that to keep your heartbeat of your reader
And it's very much
feeling
the
the
same
same way
as
the
D&D.
heartbeat of your character.
Yeah. I would say that's the same thing as a dungeon master. The more you're describing, the safer it is.
Yeah.
But the rules of 3.
Rule of 3. So if it's comedy, rule of 3, right? Ba-dum. He was smart, strong, and had a weird looking nose. Like there's like 3 things. The last thing, when I write, I'll do this. It's like 3 things and the last one's absurd. The third is absurd.
Same, different.
Yeah, same, different, right? So there's 3s. The reason why there's 3s. So comedy comes in 3s, right? When you do detail, people are like, do it in 3s. When people talk about stuff, even neurodiverse people, when they will repeat something, because when you're because of like my dyslexia, I will say, Carmichael, I really love your shirt. And then I'll be like, green is a really great color on you. And then I'll be like, wow, the shirt looks really great. Or wow, what a wonderful. I always love how you dress. I love your style, right? I do 3s because I'm trying to explain that I like your shirt, but I'm not sure you're getting it.
Right.
So I'm always saying things and always be 3. So naturally, and the reason why we do that, psychologically, most humans can remember 4 short-term details in 30 seconds. But after those 30 seconds, they will forget them. So we do 3s to give that little extra space
To sink in?
to not overload your brain. So by doing the 3, they will remember it enough to go through. You'll have players that write everything down, which can be very annoying for a DM because it slows the pace. So also by giving them 3 things, it less things to write, lessens your pace, lets you to tell your story, and you don't have to wait for somebody and be like, okay, I paused the game.
And they'll get to writing all of that stuff. They just have to keep
be able to remember
investigating.
it. So you want to keep things to 3s, 2s and 3s, but mostly 3s, because after you give 4 or 5 details, people can't remember the first detail that you said.
Fun fact,
Yes.
I learned this from Disney, is that more so for Americans than anyone else, but it is true for most people, is that most people feel uncomfortable having 4 or more seconds of silence in a conversation.
Yeah. I could stare at you all day. I don't care. No, yeah, but it is. Yeah. So, and like, that's also like editing, like as an editor, right? Like, is it like every 3 seconds they want to switch in an action film? You don't want anything more than 3 seconds when they're doing an action, whatever, to keep the pacing. It's all about pacing.
But then you can break
it's
that
hard.
for like a fun beat.
Yeah. But in storytelling, right? Like pacing is almost
the most important
it's
thing.
one of the most important things.
Right.
It makes or breaks a story in a movie, in a book. So when we do our Dungeons and Dragons, how do you bring pacing in, and keep your mystery going?
3x3 helps.
3x3 is a really great idea.
descriptions.
I agree.
More tools. You brought it up a little bit earlier. Is the 3 clue rule. For any conclusion you want the players to make, include at least 3 clues. If the players have access to any 3 clues, they will reach at least 1 conclusion.
This is true.
So they have a little node system. So thinking in scenes or rooms, right? In scene 1, I have a clue for scene A, B, and C. So A, B, C. A could be the smith, B, the library, C, town hall, right?
Yeah.
So there is 1 clue to each place in the first room.
Yeah.
and the players get to choose which one. At the next spot, we get reinforcement clues to the ones that they didn't choose.
Yeah.
And you can add a clue to a new unknown. Room 1 to Smith, I will see a clue for library, town hall. So that means we should probably go to somewhere over there now.
Yeah.
But there might be a third clue, the red feather, that was never brought up before.
Yeah, something new.
Yeah. So it's 90% same, 10% new.
Yeah, why would you have reinforcing your clues as you go to reinforce your suspect, but also why would you go to the why would the Smith even matter? It becomes that thing with the chapters of my books, right? Like, you cut out a scene if it doesn't matter. What's
Exactly.
the point? If it's not moving the story forward, then you're just wasting page.
Right.
And you could use that page for that page count, that word number, because mid-grade books, we can only have a certain amount of words.
Right.
So every word matters, because you'll get a book of 100,000 words. Kids aren't going to read 100,000 words. So, what is the point? So if it doesn't have new information, what's the point of having it?
And then when you go to the library and then eventually the town hall, or either or at this in different order, they will point to the other places, the blacksmith, the library, or the blacksmith and the town hall, to reinforce why that scene was important, and then also have more red feathers.
Yeah.
So that way it's 1 breaks to 3 scenes, but all 3 scenes explain why they're there.
Yeah.
And while also pointing to the conclusion, the final scene.
I like that. I also think that
So 3 clues, 3. It's really important.
I just think that, it's all about memory too. So you want to remember the things, make it easy to write down. Yeah.
And a big piece of advice I heard from this one, because it's default to yes as a DM. It's okay to give more clues, because we need information to solve.
Yeah.
The more clues you give, it's just the easier.
Yeah, and the cool thing about being a DM is if they're off, you can add more clues to get them back on track in the mystery. So that's something you can't do with a book, because once it's published, right? But there was this not famous, but there was this thing called We Lost Our Gold. It's still online on YouTube if you want to look it up.
We lost our gold.
And there was a YouTube channel with these 2 puppets. It's Boots and something, and they had these pirates. And the makers decided they were going to bury $10,000 worth of gold coins somewhere in one of the boroughs of New York.
Interesting.
And do 8 episodes with the puppet pirates, and the puppet pirate episodes all had clues to where it was buried if you watched all 8 of them. Brilliant. Super fun. Absolutely hilarious. So what happened was they thought this was going to be a promo.
Okay.
We're going to put out our videos in 8 weeks, and then somebody's going to find the treasure, and it's going to be a huge thing, and it's going to help us do a promotion and this whole thing. Unfortunately, episode 3, people went completely off and they didn't solve it. So something like 5 years went by, and then the hurricane hit New York, and they were like, so many of the landmarks that you were supposed to find were destroyed. So they unburied the treasure and gave it to the hurricane fund.
Sure.
But it had been like 5-6 years of it being out, and nobody had solved it, because, they had made these 8 videos, and like, this is super simple, and people are going to find it. And there was a map of the subway behind them, because it was supposed to be like a news thing. And people were like, the subway means this. And they couldn't not focus on the lighted thing that was just a prop piece.
Yeah.
And nobody was listening to what the guy was actually saying, the puppet was actually saying. So I would say that too, is like, be careful of like what's distracting and what's not, right? Like when you add your detail.
It really is just a reminder that your players are not you.
No.
You can think something is easy and obvious, but you are the one who knows the answer.
Yeah.
Once you remove the answer to a question, no one knows.
And you find that like in writing too. Like my 3rd book, there's the whole like, who's the right person?
Interesting.
There's like who they're trying to find this a master criminal, and there's all these suspects, and who is this master criminal, right?
Okay.
So I have all these things, and they're so brilliant. I'm like, oh, I'm so smart, and way twisted, whatever. And my wife read it, and she was like, well, it's got to be this guy. I'm like, no, that's not the guy. And she's like, well, why is he such a jerk? And I'm all, what? No, he's not a jerk. She's like, why would he do this? Why would he say these things?
He's being villainous.
He's being a villain, and he's not a villain. Then why would he even say that? And I was like, oh, you're so right. But see, I knew the answer. Then when I know the answer, everything makes perfect sense. But somebody outside looking at it goes, that doesn't make any sense at all. Which is why we have Occam's razor, which is the simplest solution is the right one, Like,
on a flip side of that, talk quick about villains. It's kind of the problem with the good guy villain, especially in a long-running book series or a Dungeons and Dragons game, is you build up all this hype for the villain, and then you're like, but he's just a good guy. Son of
Yeah, no,
like, no, I wanted to fight him.
yeah. You gotta. I mean, like, look, man. There's like epic battles, right? Like, I don't want to know. I say this, and every Star Wars fan in the world will start hating this, but I never really want to know someone like Darth Vader's backstory. I don't want to know how Darth Vader became Darth Vader. You know why? Because Darth Vader is this evil robot dude who is killing everybody, taking over the galaxy, and I just want to see the guy fight him with the sword and beat him. Like, sometimes you're bad guy. Like, we don't want to know how Skeletor became Skeletor.
Yeah.
Skeletor is the bad guy.
Yeah.
Like, that's fine,
Yeah.
right? You don't have to give humanity to every single person. Also, being that the Empire is just space Nazis, it's just like, feels very Nazi sympathetic. But that's.
But I would say, if it is the good guy villain, so we have Darth Vader.
Not that Hayden Christensen didn't do a fucking great job in that, and that Filoni and all of them, and their story for it was brilliant and beautiful. I just am saying, I don't want to talk crap about people and creating epic goodness. I just want to say that it's sometimes the bad guy can be a bad guy, right?
He's a good guy after all, needs to be earned through the protagonist's choices. Luke influenced Vader to become a good guy. He wasn't just a good guy after all.
It doesn't always have to be sympathetic. No. And even like Darth Vader, they did a really great job. Luke saved Darth Vader. Darth Vader still died.
Yep.
It's more interesting in storytelling.
That's the biggest thing. This is stories, not real life.
It's okay to have a bad guy. It's okay to have that character and not have to redeem them.
A lot of people need bad guys to feel like they're winners.
So we have this moral code, to get back on track here. And a lot of times what you do is you have the hero has a moral code. He has the Batman one rule, right? Batman doesn't kill. If a villain like Catwoman steals things and does all this stuff, and she's very selfish and she's trying to get rich and she's doing her thing, she can still be a good guy as long as she hasn't crossed that hero's one rule. But once you've crossed the hero's one rule, there's no return back, because if there is return from that, then you have defeated the whole purpose of that character having that rule in the first place.
Hero, yeah.
If somebody could kill somebody and then come back from it, then Batman's rule doesn't matter, because he could kill somebody and come back from it.
So in Dungeons and Dragons, that line, that rule is really defined by the player's goals and motives as characters. As a dungeon master, you can just straight up ask, what do you guys want? What are your goals? Just ask.
Yeah.
And then literally that is the golden ticket to defining your villain.
Yeah.
Whether it's aligned with them or against them.
Yeah.
And they will feel like they're fighting the perfect villain.
Yeah.
And then you need red feathers to point them in the right direction.
Yeah, people argue with me about that, because like Negan in Walking Dead is a really great, terrible, horrible villain that literally beats what he said, that then has a redemption arc. But if you also think about it, they're humans put in a situation where he's doing what he thinks is right to keep his people alive, or keep humanity alive. And Rick's point of view is completely different. Rick thinks we need to save everyone. Negan's like, we need to
save the specific people.
Save people that are useful.
So it's very much that the similar motive, similar cost, or actions being done, but different line of boundary.
Yeah, and I was saying The Walking Dead too, when you have something like living zombies,
the
which
setting is defining a lot.
To be you have to be more I would argue Negan's character is trying to be scarier than the world that it is.
Yeah.
And the world is already here, so he has to be here. Otherwise, why Rick, like, he's not a bad guy, because Rick already has to deal with this evil, so he has to deal with something else.
And occasionally we see Rick get closer to that evil.
Yeah.
Like there's an amazing scene, and it was shot so well, where him and his friends are being kidnapped by some just thugs on the road, and he's trying to save his son, and he quickly turns and bites the neck off the guy holding him, and it was photographed and blocked in a way of he is willing to go as far as the evil that is this world.
He becomes the zombie to save his son. Yeah, it's a cool.
And they
have some good moments.
Storytelling.
So mysteries.
We kind of just broke down a lot of elements that come together for heroes, villains, mysteries, putting it all together. So So what's the name of your book again?
My name of my book is The Curious League of Detectives and Thieves. They're mid-grade books, so they're made for kids between 8 and 13. Although I try to write for parents so that you will also enjoy the book and not want to, when you're listening to the audiobook for the 14th time, pull the steering wheel and drive off a cliff. I want people to enjoy it. I think it's important too that kids learn mysteries because they learn to think logically, to ask questions, to be curious.
Yeah.
I think it's really important for our kids,
And someday
especially
they can
now.
join a league.
They'll be out of the league, the Curious League, yes. But they, and I think D&D does that too. I think it's a really great way for kids. I think you should always get your kids into D&D because it's a great way for them to express themselves. It's a great way for them to think. It's a great way to learn how to be co-op and teamwork and enjoy and tell stories and get away from the world for a minute and become something else. I think it's a really cool.
I feel like mystery, we'll kind of wrap up here, but I feel like mysteries work as a very flexible genre.
Mm-hmm.
It can co-op other genres like heroic fantasy,
Oh yeah,
romantic fantasy,
absolutely.
but then also stand on its own with all its subgenres as well.
Well, yeah, because you got to think about it as mystery is just a question.
Right.
So even in romance, even in fantasy, even in any writing, if you ask a question, you have somebody willing to want to find the answer. That's the mystery.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I mean, the mystery genre is,
thicker and beefier than that.
And there's a whole thing. There's a reason why it's called mystery and whatever. But there's mystery and fantasy and there's mystery whatever. But the biggest thing too is that remember, as a DM, you're telling a story, and you want to keep your audience and your players intrigued. You want to keep them involved. You want to keep them entertained. So that's where mysteries come in. Give the players a purpose. It all comes down to the purpose, right? Give them a purpose to be there.
Mm-hmm.
And it comes with backstories of characters and stuff.
Which
it's all
is just
about
more
purpose.
fuel for a mystery.
It's just, and all the backstories do, and all they do is just give you extra elements to put into your story to weave together to make this tapestry that is your adventure, right?
Yeah, because if the mystery can link up to the backstories,
Mm-hmm.
then the player and their character, and even characters from books, feel like this mystery
Means something to me.
It means something to me, and it's for me to solve.
Yeah, I mean, that's where you get into the idea of who is going to solve the mystery, who the investigator is.
Mm-hmm.
The investigator has to have a reason to solve it.
Right.
Sometimes it's just money. I'll pay you $1,000 to solve this thing. That's fine. But if you pay $1,000, like Roger Rabbit, right?
Yeah.
He gets paid to take pictures of Roger's wife cheating on him. Then the guy that she's cheating on with ends up dead, and they think Roger killed them, right? Great mystery. What makes it a fantastic mystery is that the reason why he's such a skeezy private eye is because his brother was killed by a toon. So now he's trying to find a toon that's a killer, but also he knows the pain of what that means. So now it becomes personal. And now that we took Eddie Valiant's backstory and brought it into the story, now all of a sudden he's more compelling and it's a better adventure, and we're all invested, and Eddie's invested through the whole thing because of his own personal demon, right? Where if you're just like, oh, we're going to fight this lich, and I'm like, okay, well, I'm just hanging out, and my character doesn't mean anything, then I'm personally not invested.
The bigger the adventure,
Yeah.
like, oh, it's going to be like 5-8 sessions. Well, this kind of work makes that time spent, those hours spent together, more meaningful.
Well, and also like some adventures last 5 years. Why did it last 5 years? Because we're all having a great time. We're telling stories together and we're friends.
Yep.
Why does it last 3 days and nobody comes back? Because they aren't personally interested.
That, or we finish the adventure. We're moving on.
Yeah, you finish the adventure because there are short-term
games,
things.
yeah.
But it's sort of like, series. There are one-off books. That's the adventure.
It's a movie.
That's it. It's done. It's a movie. And then there's series, and you want to last the series as long as you can until people are bored.
Yep.
I would argue like Breaking Bad, why it was so good was because they knew how it was going to end, right?
Yeah.
So,
which is important for mysteries.
And very important for mysteries.
Thank you, Tom, for hanging out and talking mysteries, D&D, your book.
Thanks.
And
thanks for having me.
Stuff we like talking about.
Yeah. Come on anytime. I'll talk all day. All right. I appreciate you.
All right, buddy. Thank you so much for watching. Make sure you have a lot of fun with your friends playing D&D. I'm C Mike. This is Tommy. Until next time.